Welcome back to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source. I am Eric Paul. You can find us online at all the social media outlets. Look for us on Patreon at patreon.com/EPS podcast. Today, I'm very excited because we're going to be talking with somebody who's directly involved in creating the primary source that we're analyzing. Thus far, it's just been friends of mine chatting about things that have already been made and are not really connected to us. But today I have Nick Vincent Barbera, who is employed at the primary source we're discussing. And so today's topic is it started out as a pop-up, right? But now it's a permanent fixture, and that would be Beetle House, NYC, which is on East 6th Street in Lower Manhattan. And thanks for joining, Nick. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me on. It's nice. So my official title in Beetle House is mainly performer and entertainer. Mm-hmm. So just to give you the rundown of the characters that I have played in my 3 years there, the main one that I play is Jack Skellington from The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yes.
But over the years, I have played a couple of other people. I was Locke, as in Lock, Shock, and Barrel, for one day. We tried that out, and
neat.
It was cool. I got to have a little onesie for most of the day, and that was my job, so that was pretty nice. I also I also tried out the Cheshire Cat, and I had like a blue suit with some cat ears, and I had a puppet carrying around with me. I did that for a couple days. And then I also did Beetlejuice for like a good couple of weekends.
I think I saw that on Instagram. You as Beetlejuice.
Yeah. But I mean, I can't really, discredit anybody. And I always have fun with the people that I work with. They are also incredibly amazing, and I would not really know how much longer I would be there without them, to be honest. So.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. It seems like it's like an improvising. I can't even do it right now. Improvisational. There it is. Improvisational.
Yeah, there it is.
Actor's dream come true, because you have a general idea of the character because of all the media that supports it, but then there's the creative part to it, where you don't know what the people that you're talking to are going to say back to you. And
big time. Because we were talking about it the other day. We get to greet a lot of clientele and guests who are amazing people. But we were talking about what it feels like to be a performer playing a character that most everybody most everybody knows, as opposed to a character that you made up. Because they have really high expectations. They come in and they say, oh my God, what if we met Beetlejuice? Or what if we met Edward Scissorhands, or Jack Skellington, or Sally, or Emily the Corpse Bride? These characters that leave a big imprint on pop culture, because it's all Tim Burton. And so it's like going to Disneyland to meet Mickey Mouse, as a kid. This guy who you saw on the screen, and now he's in front of you. Like, what do you do? What do you say? And then in their point of view, it's like, well, what do I do? What do I say? So it is pretty much an improviser's dream come true, because I love improvising. It's so much fun.
It seems like it would be just a blast. I mean, so my wife and I, my whole family, we've been to Beetle House 3 times. Twice with our son. The first time was back it must have been 3 years ago. We went down to New York, and for that reason, we went directly for Beetle House, because he had gotten into Beetlejuice pretty young. Like we went to, they had a movie in the park when he was like not even 2, and it was Beetlejuice, and we loved the movie, so we're like, let's go. He got into the character, to the appropriate level for a kid his age. And we went down to New York, and Beetlejuice was there, and he wanted to go home immediately after seeing him and we realized, because he had a similar reaction to Santa Claus, and we realized, we're like, well, it's because he knows exactly what's going to happen when Beetlejuice is on the movie, on his screen, but he doesn't know it's the unpredictability of it. And that's because the actor, whoever's portraying Beetlejuice, and that's why, like, I think the second time that he went, we met Jack Skellington, yourself, and that was much more pleasant for him, because Jack Skellington is much, Beetlejuice is at 11, Jack Skellington's at like 6, as far as the volume and the energy. And so, I mean, he was just like, and I chatted with Jack Skellington as if it was Jack Skellington. It's part of the fun of being there. And I also have a little bit of background, not with that exact kind of thing, but I did work for several years as a historic role player, and I portrayed a man that was actually did exist, but not. It wasn't like at Colonial Williamsburg where somebody's playing George Washington, and it's like, well, that's George Washington. You have that expectation. It was somebody who did exist, but nobody would know anything about him. However, it was difficult because it was the same kind of fun that you're talking about, of being able to improvise. That was a lot of fun. But at the same time, people would kind of like have an expectation about you that you had to live up to. And it was kind of difficult to do that way. And we also weren't allowed to break character. So we had to be stuck in that particular year all day long. And I can see what, if you are playing one of those characters in Beetle House, you're probably thinking to yourself, boy, I would really like to step out of character for like some circumstances, I'm sure, and just kind of be like, hey, listen, like,
that has happened a few times. The thing is that I'm particularly strict with how I play Jack Skellington, but in recent months I've learned to let loose a little bit. Because I found myself struggling a little bit when it came to interacting with people. And I think I found out that my personal problem was that it was because I was too strict with it. I think I was just focusing on the movie, and I wasn't really thinking outside the box too much like I'm supposed to. So we talked with this idea that we kind of tap a little bit more into Jack's narcissism a little bit, because when he's doing the Christmas stuff, that's all he's ever thinking about. And because he's excited and he wants to see his vision come to life, and Sally's trying to tell him, no, you got to think about this first. He's like, nope, and he legitimately like breaks a picture of himself to do it, and he does suffer the consequences about it, but he does learn from that.
That's true.
That I think is what saves him from just, having people seeing him as like this big jerk. He does learn from it at the end, but I've learned to do a little bit more of the foppish king side of him, because he's still Pumpkin King. So if he sees a chair, he sits on it. That's like his throne. So he like makes everybody grovel before him, or he goes over to this room that's got like this big, gorgeous looking sculpture of his skull at the back wall.
Oh, neat.
And he brags about it for like a good 10 minutes, so that's what I've been doing with him now.
That's good. Yeah, because I mean the movie itself only lends so much of the character, like you said. You don't get to see a lot of Jack as the Pumpkin King. He's just kind of just the very beginning with the way that he's introduced, but then throughout, like you say, he seems very single-minded. He's just focused on, being, adopting Christmas. So it must be a lot of fun it's very slipstream. I don't know if you're familiar with that terminology of taking an existing story and then kind of making your own story based on it.
Yeah. I will confess, I have not really heard of the term too much up until now, but yeah, it is very much like that. We get to, well, that's what we do with all of our characters, really, because, we all love these movies.
Yeah.
That's obviously a big help, to play characters from these movies that we are just so obsessed with. And then we often just sit around and we think, okay, well, if they did this in the movie, what would they be doing, outside of the movie? How would they react to that? Like for my case, Halloween has been evolving ever since it began, culturally, right? So how would that affect how Jack and the whole community of Halloween Town evolves with it? Does it even evolve with it? With each new monster, do they automatically become a citizen of Halloween Town? What does Jack know versus what doesn't he know? It becomes this big brainstorming session because he is the Santa Claus of Halloween.
Right.
So, and given how Santa Claus has evolved over the years, Jack has got to do the same thing in some way, shape, or form, So, it really does depend. So like, here's an example. With the latest horror movies that have been coming out, it's been very less so much of the scary guy who breaks into the house and chases the teenagers around with a big weapon. They still make those, but not as often anymore. And now it's become kind of the psychological side, like stuff like Midsommar and with movies like that, which I think are, and Get Out, which I think are really wonderful movies. And so people are scared of much deeper things. So how does that, I think, well, obviously people would watch those around Halloween. So how would that affect Jack's Halloween? How would he react to that? Would he implement those scares into how he treats Halloween? So that's what I tried to implement into Jack with guest conversation, so now, I have Jack talk about that. Sometimes if I'm working with my friend who plays Sally, we like to have our Halloween costumes be modern horror movie monsters. So like a couple of characters from The Purge or something. They wouldn't hurt anybody. They would they would just do the costumes just because they think it's fun. And so things like that. So it goes into more of the relatability of the modern audience, as opposed to just being stuck with this time capsule of these are characters from this movie in the early 90s and that's it.
Well, and that's exactly, and that's what I think what makes the place so unique is that, if it was anywhere else in the city, I think if it was anywhere closer to Times Square, you would be locked into just, go out there, do your routine from the movie and come back, back, to the behind the scenes area, that would be it. But because of where you are geographically, and so this launches perfectly into, I think, the breakdown of the actual place itself, because the first question that comes up is what material is it made from, and it's of course heavy in Tim Burton, but I really think it's great that, and what this tells us about the 2010s is that you and your friends who work there all have so much to pull from, that it's not that you're just locked into one particular act or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, also with this upcoming year, I mean, I don't want to be that guy and just like, announce things that haven't happened yet. But this past Halloween season, we've gotten more into that. So what the owners have done, they came up with this idea for themed weekend nights, right? So how that happened was that every weekend of October, they would have a different type of movie or property as a theme. So we did Addams Family. Well, yeah. So we did Addams Family for one weekend, and then we did Freddy versus Jason. And then I think the one after that was, I think it was Beetlejuice again, where it was like everybody was a Beetlejuice character.
Instead of just the one Beetlejuice. And
instead of just Yeah, and everybody else was a Tim Burton character. And then Halloween was like a big free for all. So we were able to be all of our Burton characters that same night and stuff like that. But there have been, I've been in my spare time I've been working on some ideas for other theme nights and like classic horror monsters like Dracula and Frankenstein and the Wolfman and the Invisible Man. So stuff like that. So that's definitely something that, I personally would like to see happen, but that depends on what they want to do.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be good to, because the slogan is every day is Halloween, right? So I really would like to see, we all agree. We think that definitely seeing more of the horror characters or like the classic monster characters or stuff like that. I think that would be a ton of fun to do.
Oh, and that's what's, I think, so perfect about, it's no surprise that kind of restaurant came out in the time period that it did in the 2010s, because there's just so much of that to pull from that you're never at a loss. You're never like wondering, oh, what can we do next? Because there is a definite demographic of people that they like Halloween. I have a friend from college who November 1st was his favorite day because he would go to all the stores and get on clearance basically his decorations for the rest of the year. He would get just all the skeletons and severed hands and goblets of skulls and stuff like that, and that would be like, he wouldn't put it in a box for to come out the next October. It was in his apartment all the time. And so that's what this place is basically just, it's like going into one of those, spirit Halloween stores, but it's open all year round.
And that's my birthday too, so it works out.
Oh, so of course we were drawn to it. Oh, so yeah. The next question is who did make it? And so on the website, Zach Neal comes up first, but there's others that are behind Beetle House, correct?
Yes. So so Zach Neal, Gia Farrell, and Tim O'Grady. They're really the big three that make up their own company called New Gold Empire.
Yeah.
And really that's the extent of my knowledge about that, to be honest. But yeah, so pretty much it was them and a few others that pretty much, like you said at the beginning, it started out as a pop-up where it was like a celebration of of Tim Burton and Halloween. And basically it got so popular that it stuck around and it's still there now.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to me because I think that, because on the website, it talks about, of course, Tim Burton, but it also brings up Alfred Hitchcock, Edgar Allan Poe, as being inspiration for the material inside the building and all the decorations. And it's interesting because there are other masters of horror. There's other masters of scary stuff that are out there. But for some reason, to you, what is it about Tim Burton that puts him at a different level than, say, a John Carpenter or a Wes Craven or something like that?
Well, I think the beautiful thing about Tim Burton is that he is a guy who was in Hollywood and came out of the woodwork and had a specific look. He really pushed the bar for German expressionism. I mean, we've had that from people like, say, Edward Gorey and the old silent films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. So it really wasn't anything too new. But this was a guy who would implement it for, his own little twisted stories, or he would implement it into movies that he would be signed on to. And it was so distinct and it was so bizarre that nobody was really doing that kind of stuff. But he just, like I said, he comes out of the woodwork and he's just making all these movies like Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Beetlejuice, Edward Scissorhands. They all have this distinct look about them that it's not necessarily too scary, but it's like creepy looking, but also fun.
Yeah.
And so people are looking at it and they don't know what the heck to make of it, but it's so enchanting.
Yeah.
So I think because of that, people have realized, oh wow, now we have this guy who really knows how to make a different look of spooky, if that makes sense. And the stories that he makes have a lot of different types of things that truly fit in with that world of Poe and Hitchcock and Bram Stoker.
Yeah.
Because with I actually have talked about this with my friend who plays Edward Scissorhands in Beetle House before. We like to think of him as Tim Burton's like Frankenstein, like the Frankenstein monster.
Yeah.
This guy who was made, who's half man, half machine, and he's kind of seen by the community as like this monster near the end, which is incredibly tragic, and Tim Burton has even gone on to say that he's a big fan of those old horror films.
Oh, it's very clear when you watch his. I mean, well, just in Edward Scissorhands alone, when he brought in Vincent Price to play the inventor, was I think that whenever these things show up, it's always clear who the caretakers are, and Tim Burton is one of those caretakers. Like, he takes all of those inspirations for him very seriously, and he has that attention to detail, where, like you said, everything that he comes up with has that perfect balance of scary and creepy and disturbing, but also comical. And that's what makes Beetlejuice such, it stands out, and it's so perfect that the restaurant itself is it's not called like Burton's Place, or it's specific Beetle House, and it has that Beetlejuice motif of the black and white stripes, and that's not that he's the only one that in Burton's world that does black and white stripes, but and the green, I mean, everything is just, and then he's like the star of the show, really. But because Tim Burton, and that's his like if you're gonna present to somebody any one Tim Burton movie and say this is Tim Burton at his best, I think a lot of people would say Beetlejuice is it.
Absolutely.
Because it has that perfect mix of comedy and horror, and it to me, like, just like you mentioned Edward Gorey before, that kind of work, like, so back last spring, actually, we went to Edward Gorey's house on Cape Cod. It's a house museum, and it's a very bright, Cape style house. I mean, it's on the Cape, so it has to be. And I think all houses on Cape Cod are Cape style. And it's a very, cozy little house and very welcoming. And yet it has, I mean, this is the home of a guy who made, kind of disturbing imagery. But it's like one of those things that just makes it less scary and real. Death and dying and the macabre is that much less affects you in a negative way if you're able to play with it a little bit. And so and that seems to be what the creators of Beetle House kind of came from, right? Where was that their attitude of, instead of making Beetlejuice and that whole, what he represents just for the movies, let's have people have it as a dining experience. It's pretty cool idea.
It is. I think, again, I thank them all the time for just thinking of this idea, because the whole world of Tim Burton and Halloween is like ripe for dining experiences like that. There have been in the past, like there's the Jekyll and Hyde Club and things like that, but that was about it. There wasn't really that much excuse me, like themed restaurants that would be too spooky or anything like that. Really, the closest you would get would be Jekyll and Hyde Club. But with Beetle House, where you come in and you have the characters come up to you and talk with you, and just the slogan alone that every day is Halloween,
Yeah,
I mean, what more could you want? That's like a Halloween fanatic's dream come true, or nightmare come
absolutely.
true, whatever the case is.
Yeah, whatever they want, right? Either nightmare or day.
Yeah.
So the next question is, and it goes along with who made it, and we mentioned about New Gold Empire.
Mhm.
Their status in society. I think that these kinds of themed pop-up experiences, which seems to be what New Gold Empire is all about, because Beetle House, there's actually more than one Beetle House, right? There's one in LA.
Yes, there is right now. There's two. There's one here in New York, and there's one in LA. And for a little bit, there was one in Washington D.C. But then it just kind of ended up being temporary.
Okay.
So
And so a true
yeah,
pop-up. And then
yeah,
there was, and then there was a Harry Potter themed one that the company made. I know that one was a pop-up as well. It
yeah,
didn't last. It wasn't
yeah,
intended to be, but it was something to, so Harry Potter,
yeah.
but
Steam
these that's it, Steamy Hollows. That's it.
Steamy Hollows. That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was like a wizarding coffee shop. So it was there for like a good, respectively, for like a good couple of years. And by that I mean that it was around for 1 year, and then it closed, and then it opened again a couple of Christmases ago, and then
Yeah,
if I
we
have that
missed
right.
it each time we
Yeah, I'm
went
sorry
down
about
to New York. It's all
that.
right. Well, because I mean we live closer to Boston, and I think there was a Friends Central Perk pop-up in Boston that we wanted to check out but didn't work out. But the status in society, I think, also relates to the next question, which is why did they make it? And
Mhm.
when it comes to these kinds of immersive experiences, I think it fits the interests of the population perfectly nowadays. That we are,
Mhm.
as a I mean, there's an ever growing amount of time and money devoted for fans of having these experiences of, okay, I watched the movie, now I'm going to go be in the movie, or I love the TV
Yes.
show and I want to show everybody how much I love the TV show. I want to be in the TV show. And the first thing that came to mind when I was thinking about similar type things would be in Boston, they have the Bull and Finch pub, which was the inspiration for Cheers and, the sitcom. And they kind of, and they had a couple other extensions of that they just called Cheers that were throughout New England, and they closed a couple of them recently. But if you go to the original Bull and Finch pub, they have like the regular original pub, and then upstairs they have the Cheers set, quote unquote,
Mm.
the set, and the bar is in the same kind of square shape like on the TV show, and they have all these different all the props. It's not anything from the original show as far as I understand. It's just recreation to look
Mhm.
like it.
Yeah.
One time I was actually at the Bull and Finch pub, and there's these people there from way out of town, and they're
Mhm.
tourists and stuff, and they're looking around, and they're like, boy, they really changed it quite a bit since the show ended. I'm like, you guys, they filmed it in LA. Like it was not ever here. I mean, they did
It's like, what
every
are you
now and
talking
then.
about?
I think they would come to Boston just for, because you could only get the, for special
Mm.
scenes and stuff that they would shoot. But yeah, it was in Hollywood that they made the show. And I'm just like, it was
Yeah.
all I could do not to be like, you rubes,
I would probably be that goof and just go along with it. Like,
yeah,
yep,
like, oh yeah,
they
you never
sure
know.
changed a lot.
Carla used to work here, and she used to, right over there is where she would hang up her coat. So, but I mean,
In fact, is that Kelsey Grammer over there? Why don't you go say hello?
I mean, but that's what's so great about Beetle House is that it doesn't try to replicate anything from Beetlejuice itself. I mean, there's no bars or
Right.
restaurants in Beetlejuice. There's one dining scene, at the Dietz's
Yeah.
house, but they, so there's nothing recreated in that realm.
Mm.
And that's what I think makes it so great is it's almost like, and actually I don't know if it's actually up or if it's still up, but my wife contributed a piece of artwork to Beetle House a couple
That's
of years
right.
ago. And
Yeah.
so it's a lot of like, it's just an opportunity for fans and lovers of Tim Burton stuff just to like, here's how it inspired me. And it's like you said so well, it's a celebration more than it is trying to replicate anything.
Yeah.
And that's just perfect for people nowadays, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely is. I think it. Well, that was also what I was going to say about the space too, is that I like that it's not an exact replica of a specific Tim Burton movie or anything like that. It's like this. It's this wonderfully crafted free for all in terms of design. You know, they make it look like it could be something out of a Tim Burton movie.
Yeah,
where all of these characters just come and hang out just like the guests do. And
yeah.
I'm also happy to report that that piece is still there.
Oh, good.
We have it displayed right at the bar. They were reshuffling and reorganizing the bar a little bit. So I almost got like extremely nervous because that's a very beautifully crafted thing. And I'm fortunate that they took care of it. One of the figures ended up being missing, but before she has a heart attack, we did well, the other great thing about my friend who plays Sally is that she worked this place where kids make slime and you could make little clay figures and stuff. So she made a little clay Jack Skellington, and now that's what it looks like now. And I'm just glad that we were able to figure out a way to keep that piece around, because I think that it's brilliant. I think it's really, really wonderful.
Well, she loves it. She loves doing things like that. In fact, it was a presentation that she did years ago about Slipstream, and that she did at a conference a couple years ago that she brought along. She makes doll houses that are, I actually came up with the punny name for it. I call it one-story houses, but each house is based on a different story or TV show or movie or something like that. And she has a Beetlejuice one. Nice. But she was, when visiting Beetle House, it was just the perfect combination of, you know, being inspired by other people being inspired by these stories and everything. And so it is so much deeper. It creates such a deeper experience than just your traditional immersive, and I love Disney World. I don't want to downplay Disney or Disney parks or anything like that, but
I got my Haunted Mansion shirt on right now. So
perfect. Yeah. So that's one of my, I'm a Pirates of the Caribbean. That's my favorite ride. But yes. Haunted Mansion is right there with it. It's very close. I love, the classic component to it. I love how Disney does physically put you into the movies, even when you're waiting in line for a ride, because they know what a difference that makes. But as far as, nobody's going to go home and design their own pirate and then send it back to Disney and be like, yeah, we'll put it up, don't worry. It's like next time you're here you'll see it. Like they're just they're not built for that, but that's what makes it's so impressive. So another thing it brought up is, because this seems to be the trend, so we know that Beetle House isn't meant to be a part of any particular movie. I like the way you're saying it. It's kind of like the hangout. Like when they're done filming their scenes, they're like, it's like all the characters are like, all right, we'll go back to the bar. Yeah. Like
I'm going back to the bar.
Like next to that, they need me, if they, but we went up to last summer, 2 summers ago, we went up to East Corinth, Vermont, where they filmed the exterior shots for Beetlejuice. And it was obvious that we weren't the only ones that do that, because it's a tiny town of like 600 people. But throughout the town, they have all these photographs hung up of stills from Beetlejuice, the movie, to show you where, what it looked like when they filmed the movie back in the late 80s. And, so and I've heard of like Astoria, Oregon has the same kind of thing with Goonies. People will go, they'll
Yeah.
descend, even though Short Circuit and Kindergarten Cop were also filmed there. I think that they descend on Astoria specifically to see the Goonies house. And it's a weird like pilgrimage type thing. When we went to Beetle House, we saw it as a pilgrimage in a way too, because, you know, as Tim Burton fans and as just fans of, well, creative people, because that's really what everybody who works there is, just like real creative, interesting people. We're like, you know, when you go to New York City, you know, there's you know, probably about 10 things that you have to do in New York, but we're like, how about we'll put Beetle House at the top of that list, because it's so unique, and it is one of a kind. It's not something you can get anywhere else. But yeah, I think all of this is all in, and tell me if you think I'm wrong about this, but you know, this tells us so much about the 2010s of that, the reason why they made it and what it tells us about it, about that era. I make it seem like it's long ago, but you know, well, I mean, honestly, the 2010s,
it does feel that way
because of COVID. I mean, we've been through a major turning point where everything was like going one way, and then all of a sudden, in fact, the last time we were at Beetle House was like a week before New York reported its first COVID-19 case. And when we were there, we're like, you know, on the news, like, COVID-19, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like, seemed like nothing. And then all of a sudden the world changed very rapidly. So the 2010s really do seem like a long time ago. But by that point, you know, something like this seems that much, it didn't seem like a ridiculous dream that you'd come up with. Like, oh, I love Tim Burton. How about I make a restaurant out of it? That actually could happen. And it's like, using the internet. That's how we found out about it, is social media, using the internet, using, you know, just smartphones in general, getting the word out there, and, you know, having people, you know, looking for something to do. And it reminded me a lot of like food trucks about 10 years ago. When it became like the thing. Like, you know, they would have these really interesting food trucks that made like, you know, Asian tacos or something like that. And it was more like a competition to get there, and just to say that you were the first in line, because they were like, we'll be at this cross street at this time, you know, and you were in the know if you had it on your phone, if you were on their list of things. So it kind of gave me a sense of that. There's very, very 2010s in that regard, where the smartphone has taken over so much, and, you know, has allowed for us to you know, not just open a restaurant like that and be like, well, I hope people are walking by and say, hey, look, Beetlejuice, I like that movie, let me come in. And no, they're going to be coming there. I mean, do you guys ever have to turn people away? Is it ever that busy?
Ooh, I mean, I don't really know the exact answer to that question. I mean, I have seen I've witnessed a few people being turned away, especially around Halloween weekend, because obviously that is like one of the busiest times of the year where people come, if not the busiest, because of Halloween and everything. For the most part, it's not because they've done, you know, anything that would affect the business negatively, although that has happened. But it's also because the place would just get too crowded. Luckily, for the most part, they would be patient enough to wait, because they're really dedicated to it. We have this outdoor porch area that they can sit up, they can sit out and wait. And that's all decked out too. That's all themed. So it's not like they're left out of the experience, which I think is very sweet.
Good. Yeah, no, that
clearly
is,
they need it. You know?
Yeah. You know, that's I think I mean, it's so funny talking about the modern era as if it's already happened, or, you know, as it's like but I think that people are very much, because something like this speaks to them in such a deep way, that they're willing to be like, I'll wait outside. And it's similar to waiting in line at a Disney ride, because you're going to get some experience kind of, you know, it's not like it's just New York City street, you know, and then you walk through the threshold, then it, you know, it like exudes that, you know, atmosphere. It's not something. So let me just move on to the next question here, because I think this all flows one. So where was it made? Are the creators, are they all from New York? Is that their home base? Or
well, the thing is that what's funny is that I'm not entirely too sure about that. I do know that they do have homes in quite a few different places. Like I know Zach, I think, is somewhere upstate, and has her own apartment somewhere in the city and stuff like that. And Tim, I think, is in Vermont. I could be butchering that.
Maybe
So
East
if they
Corinth,
hear that,
Vermont.
and I'm yeah, I could be butchering that. So if they're listening to that and I got it wrong, I'm so sorry. But
Well, as long as we
all
don't
I
give
know
exact
is,
addresses, then
yeah, no, let's not do that.
here's
At
their
all.
phone number.
That would
too.
be much.
Yeah.
Their address is 313.
Yeah.
So I do know that they do bounce around a lot because, again, we're talking about a place that has different locations, right? Like so so that's the extent of my knowledge there.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, because I mean, I think that when opening up something like this, the two natural places that you would look would be New York and LA, because it requires actors. I mean, you really can't. It would be fun to go into a place, like Hard Rock Cafe is fun, but
Yes.
it's not. Well, actually, it'd be pretty lame if you had like an Eric Clapton impersonator walking around. But it's like in Pulp Fiction when they go to
But it'd be memorable.
or Eric Clapton himself. Yeah. Like,
yeah, there you go.
He's like actor. But you go to like in Pulp Fiction when they go to Jack Rabbit Slim's place and they have Buddy Holly as the waiter, and it's part of the experience. But like you can't just have a themed restaurant. It'd be like 50% of the fun would be there if you didn't have an actor. So New York and LA makes absolute sense that you would have a pretty big pool of actors to rely on, to pull from, instead of, say, nothing against Pittsburgh or Omaha, Nebraska, but I just don't think that you have quite the same. But that might also be changing, because as we keep saying, the reason why people would be even interested in going to this place in the first place is because these movies have such a cult following.
Yes.
And they get a cult following because of the VCR, because of DVD players, and because we can watch these movies over and over again. So I was born in 1981. I know no other way of doing things other than VCR. My parents, of course, they're much older, and throughout their youth and even a good part of their adult years, it's like, if you didn't see it when it was in the theater, and if you didn't catch it when it was rerun on television, that was it. You didn't have a way to revisit it and to really, populate every part of your life. But we're seeing it so much with the generation of people, my age and a little bit younger, definitely younger, and even a little bit older than me, Gen X and millennials and stuff, where it's like we surround ourselves with pop culture. Our laptops are covered with stickers, our cars are covered with stickers. We love memes, and I never, is it GIF or GIF? I always forget. I always sound like
it's so okay. So this still drives me crazy. Apparently it's officially called GIF.
Good.
But
okay.
And most people call it GIF because that's just been the go-to.
That's what I go.
So I still call it GIF.
But I love those because they communicate just how, I mean, one of the reasons I fell in love with my wife was because when we were going out, she would communicate in movie quotes. Like she would just like, and the way that she landed them perfectly. Like she would just like pull out this like random quote from like It's Pat the movie, and and just like say it at the weirdest time. I'm like, oh my God, like there's nobody else like this. But there actually are. I mean, I think it's this entire generation, because we had the fast forward and the rewind. You could go at HBO and record anything off of there. I used to have tapes of just Simpsons and Seinfeld and Friends episodes that I would get from reruns, as if I didn't see it enough, and just pop it in over and over again. So I guess you probably could have a place like this anywhere in the country and have enough interest, people that I'll be your design expert. Like I'll come in and, it doesn't matter if it's in suburban, town. That's just the nature of the times. I mean, it seems like Hollywood itself is kind of dispersing. It's not like if you're making a movie or TV show, it doesn't have to be in LA anymore.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely think so. But to go off of the movie quote stuff, sometimes my friend who plays Beetlejuice there, who I was gonna talk about earlier when you mentioned him, I think the first time you guys went.
Yeah.
First of all,
seared in my brain.
Yes. First of all, I want to say that I love him dearly because his energy level is exactly what you said. It's like I've always said, it's like a force of nature. He comes in and he's just like Beetlejuice. He's just like him. He comes in and he can't get a word in edgewise because he's like, come on out. I gotta. How do you like your drink? Is it good? I did really a bunch of sick stuff back then. It's like, hey, Jack, come over here. You want to talk about the time when we went to Vegas and we had the Kager? Like all that kind of stuff. And for the most part, and I do this out of respect, I don't say anything anymore. I just let him come in and I just let him do his thing. I put a word in here like sometimes, and then whenever he leaves the room, it's just like I gotta catch my breath like 3 times because he's just that good. But anyway, so the thing is that the both of us have a big shared love of stuff from the 80s, which is unfair of me to say because I was born in 94. But I still am a sucker for that stuff. And one of our favorite movies is Hook. Oh, yes. So to a point where we both have that movie memorized like that, right? So there was a day where, we said hi and, there was a big silence as we were getting ready for stuff like that. Nothing happened. We were just quiet. And so I was just like, he started off with I hate being disappointed, Smee, and I hate living in this foul body, and I hate living in Neverland, and I hate Peter Pan. And then we just did this whole, I turned out to be Smee, and then he turned out to be Hook, and we did that whole scene like word for word. And it proved to be a great warm-up that day for us acting up there, and it felt good. It feels good to work with people who work off of movie quotes as their bread and butter,
Well, I mean, it might come off to some people as kind of lowbrow or low culture or something like that, but I don't think it is. I mean, we didn't choose to have that media made while we were growing up, and so we have no choice but to, if I grew up in the 17th century, I would be reacting off of the artwork that I saw around me and the music that I heard. And so we have no choice but to have that part of our lives. And it's been around us so much. So that makes sense that it would be that way.
I agree. I mean, here another example to go off of the whole Halloween stuff, the old Universal monster movies, like the Invisible Man, Dracula, the Wolfman, Frankenstein, and all that stuff like that. People still, I mean, they're old. They are what feels like centuries old, but the thing is that whenever somebody mentions the name Dracula, we always think about Bela Lugosi with his accent. I bid you welcome here to my castle. And he's got the cape and the fangs and stuff like that. Or with Frankenstein, or Frankenstein's monster rather, he's the big guy that's got like the big frame and the green color. That's integrated into our subconscious because that's automatically what we think of.
But then we throw into the mix, so Herman Munster was directly from that. And then now whenever you see the large frame with the bolts on the neck, and it could go either way. It could either be Frankenstein's monster or it could be Herman Munster. And it's so funny how these things just get, it's like I think I've mentioned in another podcast, but if you've ever seen that show, the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt,
I have.
I love that. I mean, first of all, the character of Titus is the best part, but like,
oh my God, I love him so much.
When he's looking for, I think, like a tape container or
Yeah.
something like that, and he goes digging in the landfill because he goes to all the stores. They're like, no, we don't have those. We haven't had them in, and he ends up in the landfill, and he can tell like what era he's dug down to. He's like, he finds like a Mark McGrath on the cover of People, Us magazine. He's like, oh, 2001. And then he keeps digging and he finds a Furby, and he's like, oh, I'm in the he just keeps going. But that's what we have. I mean, our entire anyone born after, I guess, 1981. I think there's a reason why Gen X cuts off in 1981 is because that was the next generation, and that was going to be the people that would cross over. Our youth would go over the top of the millennium. And as it's been going on, we just have so like this ever growing pile of stuff to sort through and to make things with. And so, I mean, it goes without saying that we would communicate with each other that way, that you would just use lines from Hook, and, you're not the only one, just so you know, we talk in our house all the time like that. And that particular interaction too is whenever I'm unhappy about something, I'll talk about the things I hate. But I always think about this. Next time you watch that Simpsons episode with Lisa's substitute teacher, which was Dustin Hoffman, they had to re-record the last the last line he did from the show when he's saying goodbye to Lisa, and he's right. They had to re-record that, so they met him on set filming Hook. So he was dressed fully as Captain Hook saying those lines. And so every time I watch that, I always just like picture in my head, Captain Hook sitting there and be like, Lisa.
Oh my God.
You are Lisa Simpson,
That is amazing.
But so I think we've answered this next question already quite a bit, including just now, but I might as well just ask it anyway. So
sure.
When they made Beetle House, and when you're there, every single time that you're there, who seems to be the intended audience? I know you get, parents like ours who bring their kid for some reason, and then you have
for some reason,
older people that might show up. But is it by and large Gen X, millennial, Gen Z?
I would say it's been that bubble. I mean, I would say mostly Gen Z with just the right amount of Gen X, because with Gen X because like you said, the cutoff would be around like 81, and pretty much the 80s and the 90s was the big, like, where most of the Burton films that we think about come from, like with Beetlejuice. I always think that the big three are Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands and The Nightmare Before Christmas. I mean, those three have become incredibly popular, where a good majority of the most popular Halloween costumes comes from those three movies.
That's true.
Not to downplay the other movies that came later, but those are the big three that most everybody thinks about when they hear the words Tim Burton, when they hear the name Tim Burton, rather. And then you have the generations that came after that, when we were talking about how the phone gets used for everything now. And I would ask guests, so how did you find this place? That kind of thing. And for the most part, they would say they found it on social media. The most I ever hear is TikTok.
Oh, really?
And they would come over and they would check the place out and they would really dig it, and also, like, to give everybody a little window into how we interact with guests for a little bit. There have been some people who have come into Beetle House not knowing what any of it is.
Really?
Yeah. It is surprising.
It's kind of unique.
But it is unique. But rather than just kind of throw them under the bus, because I don't want to do that. I pretty much, like, here's an example. I'll give you an example. So say I'm meeting somebody and somebody says, I've never seen your movie. Usually what happens is that their friends react first, and they go, "Oh my God, why can't you get your ish together?" All that kind of stuff. And I would go, "No, it's okay. It's okay." And basically I would just kind of say, "Okay, so I'm Jack Skellington. I am the king of Halloween and everything there is to do with it, right? Well, there was one year where, if you could believe it, I didn't want to celebrate it. And I won't give away anything too much, but just know that Halloween and Christmas are involved. That's all I'm going to give away, And then that would be a way to get that guest kind of excited for it, whereas just like, "Oh, that sounds fun. I want to watch it after this." Or, the same can be said with just the appearances of how we look. Like Edward Scissorhands. People would look at this guy just come in with these scissor hands, and they would think, "Oh, I want to know what that guy, like, what's the deal with that guy? Like, what's he all about?" And, "Oh, let's go watch the movie." Or same thing with Beetlejuice. They're like, "What is that guy on?" "I have no idea. I think we should go see his movie." Like that.
Yeah. Or I go uptown and go watch the Broadway show,
Oh, that's true. And it is coming back. It's coming back in April. So.
Okay. So I was, because like, I was going to say, like, well, first of all, some of the people I run into them frequently, and I'm like, the people that have only seen a movie once, they don't watch movies like I do. Like for me, movies are like, it's if I'm in a certain mood or the time of the year, we'll put certain movies on over and over again. And there's some people, for as much as there's people like my wife who will quote, there's other people that they're like, "Oh yeah, I saw that once, like a long time ago when it came out." I'm like, "What? Like, how do you not watch something over and over again?" Like, it's just like, you don't even have to be sitting there in front of the TV watching it intently, but just like having it on as you're doing housework, or like if you're doing, it's just such a weird thing to think of somebody. It's like, "So go through this again. He has scissors on his hands." Like, I don't understand. Like, how did this happen? Like, I'm like, you don't remember like any of it?
I want to be the fly in the room for when that movie was pitched, just to see the initial reactions to that. Just like, "Wait, what? He has what? He has who's going to watch that?" And it turns out a lot of people want to watch that. So
that's the magic of Tim Burton, is that he can make something as crazy as that and yet make it a perfect Gothic, modern Gothic tale. And but yeah, I think the audience is very clear, because other places like it, other themed locations, that seems to be the main draw, once again, because we are the rerun era, of just, so last summer my family, we took a trip to the Grand Canyon, and it was inspired by, like, I kind of say this meekly, but I was like, yeah, one of the reasons I wanted to go to the Grand Canyon is because I saw the Brady Bunch do it. And like, I know it existed before them, obviously, but like, that was that series of episodes, rewatching as a little kid, I'd watch it on, Nickelodeon. I'd be like, "Yeah, it looks like fun," And so like when last year, my wife's like, "What do you want to do, for our big trip?" I'm like, "Grand Canyon." And along the way, we, everything from the movie Twister to Raggedy Ann to Elvis, and Sun Records and Breaking Bad and The Simpsons. We went to Knoxville, Tennessee, on our way back. We didn't spend very long there. I just wanted to see the Sun Sphere because of that Simpsons episode where Bart goes on the road and they end up in Knoxville. And I was so disappointed, because right after we looked at the Sun Sphere, and we did all the lines from that episode of The Simpsons in front of it, it's full of wigs, and I said something to somebody around. I'm like, "So is the World's Fair going to be happening again this weekend?" Like the line from, and they didn't understand it. I'm like, "What? Like, how do you live in Knoxville?" Like, if they had a Simpsons episode set where I live, I would be like in on the joke the whole time. Or, even like and so like almost everything that I do, and every time we go anywhere, it's led by pop culture. It's just like, that's what, that same trip, that the last time we saw you 2 years ago, the next day we went and saw the Ghostbusters Firehouse, which, they do it up a little bit. They repainted their ladder symbol with the Ghostbusters right there by the door.
Mhm.
We went down the street to CBGB's, or it's a jean store now, but I wanted to see that. We even went to where the outside of Monica's apartment on Friends.
Yeah.
It was like, again, we're in New York City. We should be going to see the Empire State Building and the Met, or going to we did get to go see the Natural History Museum that trip too, but like all this other stuff, not the Statue of Liberty. Let's go see Monica's apartment. Like we're just
Mhm.
our whole, and people had taken it, like had written their
Mm.
favorite lines from the show all over the wall. And I'm like, same thing I said I should have said to those people in Boston, like, they didn't actually film the show here. Like, Joey's not upstairs right now. Like, he moved up,
Could you imagine if he was?
or some guy looks a lot like him is always getting pestered by people. Like,
You're
get
like,
off my
well,
back.
really? Well, then who's that? And he's like, oh, well, now I'm in trouble. Now I'm in trouble.
Nobody that can look anything remotely like any of the characters can live within like a 6-block radius of that house, without being accosted by, like, are you Phoebe? So can I have a massage? So the
Gets on a table.
she might actually see. I mean, again, you could probably do that nowadays. You have so much of a built-in audience. It's like, if you looked even remotely like Lisa Kudrow, you'd be like, yeah, I'm going to make a relaxy cab. And so the last two questions, and I really appreciate you taking this time. This is a great conversation.
Sure.
And I guess
Yeah,
before I ask you anything else, is I have two questions that only somebody that works at Beetle House can answer. Is one, have you ever had somebody from any of the movies or Tim Burton himself ever stop by? And two, that might go along with this, is there any other, like, is there legal issues that come up with using the characters or anything like that?
Well, to answer both of those questions back to back, the first question, I have a couple of different stories about. First of all, Danny Elfman did come to visit, but it was just before I started working there. Now, the thing about Danny Elfman is that he is my main inspiration for music, because when I was a kid, I had a CD of like the third volume of Disney's greatest songs, stuff like that. And Jack's Lament was the 5th track on there. I remember that so vividly, because that would be the one that I would listen to multiple times, because that was my introduction to Nightmare Before Christmas, was just that one song.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so hearing his voice was so haunting to me as a kid. And that song specifically, it sounded like, if you take the vocal tracks away and you listen to the music, it kind of sounds like a classical piece.
Yeah.
And so I just thought that it was such a fascinating song. And so listening to his voice added to that. So then years later, when I found out that was him that was singing, I was like, oh my God, that guy has some voice. Then growing up, I would just learn more about him and how he prepares a melody for a musical piece, and he looks at a picture and he builds it up from there. Stuff like that. And that's why it blends so seamlessly with an environment that Tim Burton could create. So when I learned that he came to visit Beetle House, that was just when I started working there. I was like, oh man, if only I worked there sooner, that would have been amazing, But that was when he started doing his concert tours. So that was around 2015, I want to say. I could be wrong. But yeah, so we came to visit Beetle House, and they did a little interview with Zach that was live and stuff like that. So that was amazing. And my second story is that this doesn't have anything to do with any stars in Tim Burton films per se, or Tim Burton himself. But on a day that I had off, Ice-T and his family came to visit. So it was Ice-T, his wife Coco, and their kid. And that was a day when Beetlejuice was there. So they got to meet Beetlejuice. And if you look at their Instagrams, one of their posts, that's one of the biggest things to come up is my buddy posing with Ice-T and his family, and I thought that was amazing. And pretty much I have
Ice-T of Law
had
and Order fame, right? That's
yes,
the only
that's
thing I know.
right.
Law and Order
Yes.
SVU, that's it.
Law and Order SVU, that's it. So I have had dreams though where I'm working at Beetle House and it starts off like any other night, and then the next thing I know, everybody's looking at a certain direction and they're screaming. And I'm freaking out. I'm like, why are they screaming? And then the crowd parts, and it's Tim Burton or Danny Elfman or anybody from like Helena Bonham Carter. Yeah. And I'm saying, oh my God, I can't believe it's you. And then I wake up. So, so that's my thing.
Would it be funny if Tim Burton like has been there several times and nobody recognized him?
We joke about that all the time. Like he's in a different suit. Like like it's like the Scooby-Doo thing. They're in a different. He's in a different disguise, and
or he's grown like long blonde hair, and like he's.
Oh man,
it's nothing like
that would be so insane,
like a secret shopper, or like one of the, he's just checking in
on. So to answer your second question about if there's any legal trouble, because these are big characters. Again, not that I know of, to be honest, because I mean, here's what I do know, to put it this way. We are very careful. I mean, what's great is that I am allowed to sing the songs from the movie. Mm-hmm. We are allowed to quote specifically from our respected movies. There was a little bit of time where Beetlejuice could not be found in there. I won't go into detail about that. Not because of any legal issues or anything, but basically because it's a painful memory for us, and I don't want to walk tread through that again. So all I know is that if there was, Jack could not be found in there for like a long time. So we're careful, to put it that way.
I mean, I wonder, because I know that I don't even think it would necessarily be like Tim Burton himself, but I feel like Warner Brothers or the big companies, I mean, they crack down on teachers sometimes for using images of their characters in their materials without permission. And it's a slippery stream. You don't want to be letting some people use your stuff with that, and other people not. And how do you decide that, who gets to use it and who doesn't? But it's just a curious thing, because as much as I think that we have such creative outlets nowadays, it's always that worry that somebody's going to come in and be like, nope, just like get all litigious and like shut the place down. So I think that it's been open for now 6 years. It tells you that
6 years
somebody must be cool with it. It's not tucked away in some small town USA. It's not like it's most people have heard of New York City.
Well, I think also
imagine somebody shows up to your restaurant like, I don't even know New York City, and so explain to me that, and the man with the scissors on his hands.
That was Jack 3 years ago. That was my approach with him when I first started. To him it was like kind of a whole new world, but to him it would be kind of bizarro. It would be like a Home Away from Home, but it would also wasn't, so he was kind of confused. Why is everybody putting rectangles in front of my face? What is this? But I think also what kind of helps is that at the end of the day, we're people who like to dress up in costume as we would on Halloween itself, so this is a place where we're allowed to do that, because we're allowed to use these characters to express our love of Halloween, but also our creative abilities. I see.
Okay, so with that, I mean, that puts it perfect then, because if it is, if they say in their presentation this is Halloween, all year round, then it's that's good. It's like
that's the way that I see it. Anyway. I like to. It's kind of like when people go to a Renaissance fair and they dress up. It's kind of very similar to that too, where it's like we're people who are in costume because we love doing it. That's the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Again, that's just my perspective.
But we're talking, and so I think, well, this goes directly into the last two questions: is what ideas or behavior does it convey? And one of them is Halloween ain't just for October. And it's a unique holiday in that way, because I mean, there are certain Halloween towns. Salem, Massachusetts is one of them. We went to Sleepy Hollow this past October. That's another one. But it is something that anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world really could be converted into being creepy. But it's like, is it actually, now that you mention it, I just had a dream the other night, which maybe was a foreshadowing of this podcast, because I had a dream that it was like this time of year. So we're recording this actually on President's Day in February, if you're listening to this. And I had a dream the other night that it was like February, and I went outside and all of our Halloween decorations were up. And it was like snow on the ground, but I had the big pumpkins and everything all around the yard. And I was like, and we were just like, is it a little bit early or a little bit late? I don't know, but it's, Halloween, they always have like Christmas in July, but that's always kind of lame. They do, there are those like Christmas stores that have the Christmas ornaments, that you can buy any time of the year. But that always feels weird to me when I walk into one of those places, because like, they have the animatronic reindeer, and there's, or the time I thought it was an animatronic Mrs. Claus, but she was real and she, scared me. There's that, but there's also, so there's, but like Halloween can kind of, scream. We just went and saw that in the theater the other day. It came out in January, and I was even wondering, I'm like, isn't this a Halloween movie? But I'm like, no, I mean, this kind of stuff can show up anytime.
And because, the thing about it, to go about what you were saying, is that with Christmas, those visuals like of Santa Claus and of his sleigh and the Christmas trees and the ornaments and the gingerbread man and everything like that, we kind of as a society devote those images to that one time of year, that one block. But with Halloween, the spectrum is much broader, because a lot of things scare people. That goes beyond ghosts and skeletons and vampires and stuff like that. I mean, like I was saying earlier, a lot of horror movies that are coming out are things that are psychological, that people are scared of no matter what time of year. It could be March, and I mean, I hate to make this hypothetical, but Ghostface just shows up in your house in the middle of the night. How horrific would that be? So
you're bracing for it in October. You're not bracing for it in March.
Right. We brace for those images in October because of how pulp culture sees it. It would make sense to see all those scary things happen alongside all of these classic Halloween images, because they're pretty scary. But, with Halloween, it's like I was saying earlier when I play with Jack as a character, a lot of different things scare people every single year, whether for the better or for the worse, and it does affect that holiday specifically. With Christmas, it will always be about the the ho 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 and all that kind of stuff, and it will evolve. I'm not saying that it won't, but those will still remain forever. And I'm not saying that pumpkins and ghosts and skeletons won't, but if you really think about the history of Halloween, a lot of different things have been added on to that. I mean, if you ask somebody in the 30s, around the time of Dracula, that years from now, people are going to associate Halloween with Freddy Krueger and Jason and Michael Myers, these guys who are kind of more of the modern monster trade. They would look at you like you were nuts.
Yeah.
But every October, we think about them all the time. So, it really is interesting and fascinating how that affects certain times of year.
It is. But it's like I was saying before, my friend who, he used to decorate, I don't know if he still does, he might actually decorates with the spooky stuff. And even in our household, we have, parts of our house that are, now I recognize my house isn't like a normal one. It has some corners of it that most households don't. And we have far more animals than most people do in their houses, and of different varieties and things. But it's by and large, we have, that's the one holiday that doesn't really get shuffled out. Like we do it up in October. Like there's more pumpkins and vampires and stuff like that in October. But I mean, actually, that's why I love Jack Skellington so much, is because he is perfectly acceptable to have up for at least 3 months out of the year. In fact, we have a Jack Skellington that goes up in our, I put him up in our like fake cemetery at the beginning of October, lording over it. And then when I started putting away the Halloween stuff and getting the Christmas stuff out, I'm like, wait a minute, he doesn't have to be put away. And so I put him sitting next to, like, he's still there. He looks very sad right now because the snow has gotten to him. But like, I haven't pulled in all of the Christmas stuff in yet. But he's like sitting next to a snowman and just like his arms like, he's looking pretty sad. But I'm like, he could actually fit, if I. And maybe next month I'll put a little leprechaun hat on him or something, and have him around all year.
I used to, like, I think my first year working at Beetle House, I would pay attention to the different times of year and what shifts I would be getting. So I would find different little accessories for Jack to wear. So around, like you said, around St. Patrick's Day, I would put a tiny little leprechaun hat on, or I would, or for Valentine's Day. This might sound kind of gruesome, but I did this gag where I would say, oh, Sally gave me her heart and it's still here in my pocket. Let me show you. And I would pull up this little plastic gruesome looking heart in my hand, and I would make it look like it's still beating and stuff like that. Or for Easter, I would just get a couple of bunny ears and just pretend I was the Easter Bunny and just hop around.
Well, I mean, that's what's fun about that movie.
Out of some people.
That movie is so much fun. I love that idea at the very beginning when you see all the different holidays kind of coexisting, and there's like a nexus of them, and you can go from one to the next. And I love that idea. And it actually very similar to what you were describing before, of picturing Beetle House itself as being like the waiting room for all these characters when they are about to go. Somebody's putting the DVD of Beetlejuice on. I gotta go. I'll be back in a little while to have that drink. And,
I'll see you in a little bit. Yeah.
There you are.
Some guys watching me like a stalker. I'll see you later.
You do that so well. I love it.
Again, not as much as my friend does, but thank you. Thank you.
It must be just so much fun. And I think that's really what the main idea that the whole restaurant just exudes is that creativity, the attention to detail, the breaking of the fourth wall. Hopefully your fourth wall doesn't actually break, but the idea that people aren't just confined to our screens, that we can go and sit and have dinner and great food at that, and also feel like you're right in the movie, or in a collection of movies, or like you're in the back of the video rental store and it's all come to life, like a Toy Story type thing. And it's just it's so much fun. And that's such a, so telling of the time period that it came out. I don't think something like that, if it came out in the 90s, it probably would have been ultra scripted and very much, you have to, but because it came out in even the 2000s, I think would have not been quite there. But like you mentioned before, most people are finding out about this on TikTok, or they're learning about it on Instagram or on Twitter. It's not so much about, you're not going to necessarily get like a brochure, a travel brochure of New York City and say, oh, on page 53 here of this AAA travel guide, it says do you like the movies of Tim Burton? And you'll love Beetle House. It's like you have to be in the know. You have to have your fingers on the pulse of everything going on, and then you get to just dive right in, and it's so perfect for our era. And it could have only come out when it did. I don't think it would have gotten the same kind of. Now for the future of Beetle House, I love what you say about, and I'm sure you're not the only person that does this, about your attention to detail, that and that's where greatness always comes out, is like when people pay attention to everything that they do, that's when you get great things. Do you think it's that attention to detail is going to continue this Beetle House for several years ahead, that it's going to stay fresh?
I genuinely think so. Because I think New York City is ripe for the picking with themed places to begin with.
Yeah.
And I mentioned a couple of them earlier in this episode, but there was the Jekyll and Hyde Club. That is still the big talk of the town. And then you have the Beetle House. There's that, and then there's this place called Wicked Willie's that looks straight up like it could be from a pirate movie, because you have all the wooden gangplanks and then the ship's wheels and the ropes hanging and everything like that. So yes, I mean, the idea of themed restaurants is still alive and well here in New York City, as well as a lot of other places in the country, heck, even the whole world.
Yeah.
And so I think with a place like Beetle House, what I do love about working there is that there is no fourth wall. Because like I said earlier, these characters have come here to party just like you, and we treat you as such.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are a few scripted things that happen here and there, but not too often. And it's good to kind of have that relaxed state of mind where, I'm hanging out with Beetlejuice like he was my neighbor, or Edward Scissorhands like he was my local barber, or with Jack Skellington like he's this celebrity that really likes people, like that kind of stuff. Because it kind of builds onto that world a little bit more, and it gives people, like I said, that relaxed sense of immersion, where it's like, oh, okay, I can hang out with these guys like they're my friends,
Yeah. Well, I mean, because in a lot of ways they are. I mean, these stories mean a lot to people, and the characters, of course, are the reason why we love the stories so much. And so it is, as from the visitor perspective, it is so much fun to suspend disbelief for a little while. I wouldn't go into a place like that and be like, I'm not participating in nothing, just get my food and, get out, like
get my food and go. Yeah.
In Christmas Story, when the witch, comes up to the little kids and they're waiting in line.
That's right. Yeah.
He's like, I'm thinking, and she kind of shrugs, she's like, whatever, and just walks away. Like, I wouldn't be that guy. I wouldn't show up in a place like that. And it's so much fun to have that, because it's, and I keep going back to the specific location in New York that the restaurant's in has something to do with that. It's a very, it's a different place. It's not right on, Broadway. It's not in Times Square within reach of it. It's kind of on the border of like Greenwich Village, Bowery.
Around that area,
Lower East Side. So it has that eclectic, it's off Broadway. I mean, it's not what you would expect, and so I think because of that, it has that much more of an edge to it, and not a bad edge, not like a rough one, but just like a far more creative people involved, inspired people are there, and I think that's what makes it such a special place. And I don't really know nearly as much about LA's geography, but do you know where the LA one is in comparison to anything that would make it, like the New York one?
Well, every time I make a family visit to LA, I've been meaning to go. I think it's right on that strip, one of those strips that's closer to Hollywood. I can't remember. But I do know it's close by Hollywood in some way, shape, or form. Because it'd be fun
if you ever encountered the other Jack Skellington.
And, they do have him there. And I would love to. I would love to be in the same room as Jack, which would be surreal to me. But
it would be
for
great. The other people there in the room.
I mean, like, heck, one of my lifelong goals is to meet Jack at Disneyland, and I have yet to do that still, because their line is always super long. But I think it'll be worth it. So, whether it would be in the in the LA Beetle House or at Disneyland, I would love to just like shake his skeletal hand and just say thanks for everything you do. It would be great.
it's so and the last question that we've answered a lot of these even just by talking about it in general, but the last one is it prescriptive or descriptive? And everyone knows what descriptive is, but prescriptive is, does it make you want to think or feel a certain way? And so what I put there is it's almost entirely prescriptive in that there is there's a specific thing that you are to do with it, and a certain way to feel as you are there at Beetle House and enjoying everything, but at the same time I put as a little question mark, or is it? Because is it, I mean, I guess I'm stumping myself here, but I think what I'm curious from somebody that is yourself the creator, you're part of it, and it just lines up really well with what you're saying. It's like you could have more than one person playing Jack Skellington, and each one of you has to appear a certain way, so your description will fit, so people know you are. You wouldn't be able to wear a purple mask with some lobster claws or something like that, and be like,
I hope not,
and start talking like Jack Skellington, like, oh, I get it, he's Jack Skellington.
I hope not. That would be one of my worst
you
dreams.
have to have some sort of description involved,
right?
But
yeah,
it's like each one of you're going to have the same voice, you're doing Jack's voice, but it's still you playing that character. And it's such a but you can't base it off of other people's stuff, because it's not like, because there's been other actors who play the same character of, even in like this, like in the Batman, the Christopher Nolan, Maggie Gyllenhaal took over for Kate Cruz there, Tom Cruise's wife, and took over her character. And it's like nobody really cared, but what I guess what I'm saying is you're doing these characters independently from each other, so you have to be very much your own version of it. And it's is that weird for you, or is it cool?
It's a little bit of both. I think the biggest example that I can think of is when our regular Beetlejuice was taking a break from it for a while, and they asked me to, we came up with the idea for me to cover for him until he was up for it again. And so I felt like I was walking on the thinnest wire, because, he's the guy, and, they're used to having him play him. And so when I would often ask everybody at the end of my first night as Beetlejuice, I would say, how did I do? What is something I could change? What's something that I can add on to? And they had really good feedback that was good and constructive and stuff like that. And there's video of me and him as Beetlejuice in the same room, because we just thought, what the heck? Why not? Let's just do that because we think it's funny, And there is a big difference. Like I said, he's a lot more energetic than I am. And it was because I was still feeling it out. Yeah. So, he's going to every single table. Like, here's a good way for me to describe it. Let's say that he and I were on a marathon from New York to Texas and back again. By the time I would get to Wyoming, he would probably hit China. So it was nerve-wracking. There is a big difference there. But I think, it was fine that we did our own. It's perfect that we did our own different take about it. Yeah. So for him, he focuses entirely on the movie. For me, it was a mix of the movie and the old 90s cartoon. So I kind of made Beetlejuice, like my Beetlejuice, the same sleazeball from the movie, who's like a bajillion years old and doesn't know he's acting creepy. But I also made him a little bit more of the prankster guy from the cartoon. So cool. he would do that whole, like, that made you look, like that kind of thing. Or he would just we have a fog machine and it would go off and it'll be like, oh, Sorry, had to relieve some tension. Sorry about that. All that kind of,
a little bit more cartoony, a little bit more Looney Tunes versus
yes, Looney Tunes was a big influence for my Beetlejuice. Because he would be kind of like,
he is so much fun because just in the movie he goes back and forth from being the villain to the hero to the villain again in just this any minute. And I'm so glad you brought up the cartoon. Completely forgot about that because I have to bring up the Broadway show.
Yes.
Have you seen that? Have you gone to see it?
I have. I had such a great time watching it from beginning
visually.
to end.
I forgot that it was
a
movie.
My God.
I forgot it was a live show. I thought I was in a movie.
Yeah.
And it was, that's an ultimate reimagining of it because actually the second time that we went to Beetle House, I think, and I'm sure you've gotten a lot of people have done this, that, before they go see the show, the Broadway show, they stop by a Beetle House either before or after for drinks or dinner or something like that to make the full Beetlejuice experience. But when we went to see the performance, I liked it, but when it hit me that I'm like, oh, this isn't just the movie on stage, it's a reimagining. Right. That's when I was like, oh, okay, because like I kind of like Beetlejuice at Beetle House because that's he's basically just the movie coming alive. It's like watching. Yes. It's not so big in the United States, but I think in Britain they like the lookalikes. You can do if you look remotely like a celebrity, you get gigs going around to different events and stuff and acting like them. And I remember watching a whole documentary on Netflix about it one time. And like I said, it was predominantly in England. And actually, when I used to do the historic role playing thing, I always found that English visitors got it and went along with it a lot better than a lot of Americans did. But anyway,
yeah, that makes sense. I hate to say it, but yeah,
they seem to have that like kind of almost like theatric,
yeah.
But we find out their entire island is one big theater. No, wasn't that what Shakespeare said, right? The world's a stage, but it's just like one big island.
All the world is stage. Yeah,
there you go. But it was like they had this one guy, he was portraying, he was doing David Brent from the British Office, and I loved it because I'm like, that's one of my favorite characters, and there's only 7 episodes or 12 episodes of The Office total where you get to see David Brent. And so seeing this guy who's not Ricky Gervais but acting just like him, and how would he handle this situation? So it's like along the same lines. It's like being able to see Beetlejuice off of the movie in a restaurant and doing things that we didn't get to see in the movie but only could imagine would take place in the movie. So it's running a very interesting line between being descriptive, as in, he looks, sounds, acts just like Beetlejuice from the movie, but then prescribing it to the actual setting that he's in. I mean, he's not in New York at all in the movie. No. But he definitely acts like he reacts off of people so well, and that's really what makes Beetle House such a fun primary source to analyze, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. And also what I was going to say earlier when we were talking about the idea that this is where they come to hang out, and all that stuff. Some time ago, I wrote a little backstory for it, as in like why Beetle House is there, why you get to meet the characters there, and all that jazz.
Yeah.
And I'll try to give the the shorter version of it. But what happened was that it was after the events of the movie Beetlejuice, and he's in the waiting room and everything, and he gets to see Juno again, and pretty much like his way of civic service is that he has to start a business, like for real. Not a bioexercising thing. He has to do something that will actually do good for humanity. He's like, oh man, damn it, So he starts off with like a food truck or a food hearse, right? And then that actually does become popular, and then somewhere in the underworld, Beetle House was made because, he had to have his name on it because he's that big egomaniac guy. And so as time went by, a lot of special clientele went over to come and visit. Dracula, the Invisible Man, Freddy Krueger, Jason, and like all these infamous souls of the underworld, they see this place and they're like, oh, let's check it out, So it kind of became the Brown Derby of the underworld for a while. So you have all these undead celebrities just come in and hang out with Beetlejuice and everything. And it isn't until years later where Lydia Dietz is invited to go see it by the ghosts of the Maitlands. So she goes to see it. She's the only living person that ever sees Beetle House because they say that she's an exception. And she thinks, this would be a really great place to put, up there, somewhere, because there's a lot of people who would like this kind of thing. Beetlejuice at first is like, I don't really know that. And then there's the idea of tourism. So he's like, oh, you know what? Okay. So pretty much what happens is that that's where that place on 6th Street comes from, because it's like it started out very, very small.
Yeah,
we've moved since, but it's that very small alcove. They're making this thing. Nobody knows what's going on in there, but then Beetle House opens for people alive or otherwise who could come and celebrate Halloween every day. And pretty much that was my backstory for it, that they built it on this. Thanks.
That's brilliant. No,
it's pretty much like my thing. We all have our different stories, but that one is mine. Because I was thinking about how all of us as characters, we kind of go up the stairs on the sidewalk. I'm thinking, oh, what if it was built on like this small cemetery, and that's why we go upstairs and go downstairs? Like, how about that? And that's really how I started writing that one. But we have a lot of different ones. Like for Beetlejuice, they built it on his cemetery, and so so he's kind of like, it's like, I actually don't live here. I live downstairs, So that's his. And there's been a couple of other stories we tossed around. So I love that there's no official one, and that it could mean anything. So
I love that style of brainstorming, and that just like it's so. I mean, there's been creative people throughout all of history. Obviously, it's not like it'd be pretty conceited of us to be like, no, this generation is the only creative one. But that kind of like. And that what you're describing is exactly what Slipstream is all about. It, fan fiction fits into the category of Slipstream, or origin stories. I love that idea of taking something that exists and could be just be like, yeah, no, this is a business opportunity. It's plain and simple, but be like, no, it's part of a bigger story. You don't understand. This is like a long, there's always something behind it, and it's not just as simple as, and because for people that might be listening to this who've never been to Beetle House and don't expect to go maybe right away, but every corner of it is covered with some kind of Tim Burton Halloween symbols, artwork. I mean, it's not like just scattered throughout, it's every inch is just exuding that, and it's really a special place. I can't thank you enough for spending this time talking about it. This has really been incredible. And I mean, it just proves that everything really is a primary source. Don't overlook. I mean, we could, if you wanted to, take every single item from the wall of Beetle House and scrutinize it and dissect it. And like, where did this come from and why? Here's this.
I mean, I've been there so long that I could give you a story of almost everything in there.
And I love there's like Pee-wee is represented there. I love those.
I really love that the lesser known Burton films are.
Has anybody ever been a Pee-wee impersonator there? Like, has anybody ever dressed up like?
That's still an idea that we have talked about. And they would always look at me because I could just shave that. I can't describe this too well because this isn't a visual, but I could just shave my face and slick my hair and get the suit and go, dance to tequila all night,
Well,
but
with my frame, I could be him now, but if you've seen the
well, we've had this idea where we would, like I said earlier, we have ideas for things that we would like to try out, and Pee-wee was one of them. And I would love to do that, honestly. I think that would be a blast. But real quick, one of my favorite sort of lesser known Burton films is Big Fish.
Yeah, I was going to bring that one up, actually. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
That one, I think, is my favorite Burton film, actually. Like, Nightmare is obviously my big obsession, but Big Fish is definitely a favorite of mine. And so there is actual representation of it in Beetle House. If you're going to this tiny little hallway that leads to the bathrooms and the kitchen, there is a mural that Gia painted, which I think looks incredible. And it's a giant catfish under the lake, and it's swimming around, and it's about to catch the ring attached to the fishing line. And I thought that was great, because that is, like I said, that's one of my top favorite Burton films ever. And the fact that it gets, mentioned in there somewhere just makes my day. I love that movie so much.
It doesn't, you're right, it doesn't usually get talked about in the same conversation as those other three that you mentioned, or even throwing in Batman, the two Batman movies that he did. But
yeah,
what I liked most about Big Fish is that it was something different for Tim Burton. It's not nearly as text, like the tone wasn't as dark, nor was the story. I mean, like a lot of Tim Burton tends to have like a, a lot of contrasts of colors and stuff, but this one was much more brighter and vibrant, and and all that. And it plays with like timelines in a funny, interesting way. I like that a lot. I think I might have to go rewatch that, and maybe before we know it, that movie might have a renaissance, and
I hope
have
so.
Beetlejuice's head, and we can have the Big Fish House and just have catfish fries all the time.
That would be fun.
I think they already have that. They might have that. It's just called every restaurant, every seafood. Probably.
That would be nice, though, to go into this space and be greeted by Edward Bloom and the one-eyed witch. That would be fun.
Stories and
yeah, that would be.
I think we're coming. Yeah, let's do it. We could.
Let's do it right now.
Have a contest. Whoever can tell the tallest tale gets a free drink or something like that. And
you know what? That would be so much fun. Oh my God, Zach, Gia, Tim, if you're listening, can we do that for a day, please? That would be
Big Fish Day.
Just one day, and then I'd be happy.
That'd be Get Ewan McGregor to come by, and it'd be all good.
Oh my God, that would be a dream. He's one of my favorite actors ever, so that would be amazing. That would be cool.
Well, and this is what I think what Beetle House really represents is it's just like there's no limits. If you have an idea, and it seems like that's exactly what Zach did, was just here's an idea for something fun, like just what would a restaurant that has something to do with Beetlejuice have in it? Well, all this stuff.
There you go. There you go.
Exactly what you'd have. And same thing with anything. It's a fun practice. It's a fun just like exercise to do, but they actually went through and did it, and you're having a great time doing it, and those of us who have been there had a lovely time being there, and I can't wait to go back again. It's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks again for joining today. I really appreciate it. And
thank you for having me.
I'd love to have you on again. We could talk about other kind of pop culture. It's like I was saying, I think in hour number 1, it's like this steady growing pile of stuff to sort through, and every single thing tells us something about the time period in which it was made. So thanks for taking the time to talk about all those years ago, the 2010s, back in 2016. Beetle House came out.
Yeah, listen, you just say the word and I'm there. I love talking about this stuff.
Awesome. Well, thanks to everybody for listening. You can find us on all the social media outlets. Once again, patreon.com/EPS podcast. But thank you, Nick Vincent Barbera, for joining me today for the EPS podcast, where everything, including Beetle House NYC and I suppose Beetle House LA, is a primary source. Talk to you next time.